All right, so I've got two sets of games to go through. I actually started a game earlier this week, 628, so days ago. It's pretty much all. I didn't really have a ton of time to play Magic this week, and when I did, I got a little distracted by Vintage, which has been kind of hit or miss for me. I'm still short two Wastelands for my deck, which makes a huge difference. So anyway, um, I did go 4-0 though on the 628, and so I'm going to run through those games, and then the final game, which was today against Miles B. Then I tried playing again, leaving the deck the same way, and started having some really questionable results. I made a change that made it actually worse, and finally I just kind of undid that and went with what I believe is probably the better build, and I went 5-0 again right afterwards. So let's check out some of these games, and then I will bring up the deck list at the end, or I suppose I can just bring it up now, but it's going to be a little bit to flip through all this. But this is the final deck list for now. It changes here and there, but I went ahead and just put. I had Thirst for Knowledge in here for a little while. Went in and just put Scroll Rack back in because for 3 mana Thirst for Knowledge, of course, it does what it does. But for 3 mana Scroll Rack can sometimes, rather than just digging you three, it can dig you quite a bit deeper into the deck. And of course, it's a combo with land tax. But also, I just found that occasionally with I would get Tezzeret into play, and I would really want to be able to go get Scroll Rack, and I was unable to do so, and it wasn't in the deck, of course, and so I just felt like that came up enough that I wanted to put it back into the deck. So Scroll Rack's back in, so we got Tax Rack still going. I also took out. I had Skeletal Scrying for a little while. I took that out. I just put Liliana back in. Um, I just wanted more ways to deal with True Name Nemesis, who I'm seeing a bit more and more lately. And along those same lines, I went ahead and took out Stoneforge. I put in Council's Judgment to assist with that as well. And then the splash damage from these cards, of course, is that it's very good against like Emrakul and such. So I don't really worry too much about not having Stoneforge in here because really the equipment, like him carrying the equipment is not that important, but having the equipment is the part that matters for the Breya and the tokens. So even though I can't go tutor for one or the other, but that means that if I draw Council's Judgment, I would have drawn a Stoneforge and I could Stoneforge into a sword or whatever. But there's going to be a lot of games where I would have just rather had Council's Judgment. Like I'm staring at an opposing Dak Faden or, Jace the Mind Sculptor or something, and I'm thinking, God, I'm tired of just drawing this Stoneforge. So I'd much rather have drawn Council's Judgment here. So anyway, that was the switch. That's the thinking, and let's take a look at the games now. I think in this one I still had Thirst in here over Scroll Rack, but I'm actually going to go back to the account history, and we'll check out how things went. So the first game on the 28th was against Captain Schwiggles, which is a cool name. It's cute. And if we can just bring it up. All right, here we go. So we'll see how this went. My opponent's playing Karlov, which is a scarily strong commander, and he gets it out on first turn going first. So I'm going to, I believe, Imperial Seal here. I need to deal with Karlov as fast as possible. That thing can win extraordinarily quickly. Well, him taking my, so then he duresses a Signet on man. So him taking the Signet slowed me down. I tutored French and Tomb thinking I would go Tomb, Signet, and then Treachery immediately. But now I am behind. He actually also has removal for Weathered Wayfarer and plays a secure Scoured Barrens, which gives him life, and his commander is now 4-4. So at the end of his turn, I go in Mystical Teachings. Now take a look here. I have done some damage to myself, but the commander has already done 10 to me. It's incredible for a 2-drop how fast that thing can be, and it can actually deal lots more than that. So yeah, see here's Thirst. Would have been Scroll Rack. I Thirst here. I don't know which I would have preferred. Honestly, I could have been fine with either one of them in that particular spot. All right, so he swings in. I'm going to Swords. I expect him to just replay his commander here, but he plays Sin Collector. And he takes my Merchant Scroll, so that's unfortunate. But I'm still going to make the play that I was thinking I would have made for his commander, which is Yawgmoth's Will. I'm now at 5. I go get a land. Tap 2, I gush. Into a Mox Opal, which was fantastic. Play Mox Diamond from the graveyard, Mox Opal, cast Azorius Signet from the graveyard, Swords to Polish this creature, and cast Weathered Wayfarer. I suppose I could have cast Thirst there as well. This is just fine. Alright, opponent plays Timno the Weaver. I am now able to Weathered Wayfarer. He has missed land drops multiple times, so I'm going to go fetch Wasteland. Treachery Timna. I'm now at 3. This is not good. Unfortunately, Mana Confluence, Ancient Tube is your mana base when you're that low on life is just not good at all. But I do play Breya for a reason. So let's get Breya down and pass the turn. I've got Spell Snare up, which is a recent addition as well. Opponent plays Sword of Fire and Ice, attempts to equip Timna. I have to remove it in response, which takes me to 1 because I'd use Ancient Tomb to do it. I'm not going to Weathered Wayfarer for City of Traders, which will allow me to cast Tezzeret without taking any damage, and I can now Tezzeret into a Winter Orb, of course. Alright, let's apply some pressure. I'll hit with Breya, leave the Thopter back. I don't know what haste creature you could have, but I mean, I'm at 1, so why play around with it? I'll go ahead and fetch myself a Chrome Mox Imprinting Vampiric Tutor, which doesn't seem particularly strong right now. And I am simply going to blow up the board with an Armageddon. My opponent plays a land, so I go ahead and Weathered Wayfarer. I'm using Weathered Wayfarer again on my turn, so I picked up an Azorius Chancery and smash for damage, and I picked up a Volcanic Island to go with this Lightning Bolt in my hand. I'll go ahead and Preordain into Crucible, using Tezzeret's ability to generate lots of mana. Play a Wasteland from the graveyard, killing my opponent's land. He had missed a second land drop. I believe at this point the game is over, and my opponent does too. Even though I'm at 1 life, it's probably not going to get that last point of damage. Plus, I do have Breya to gain me 5 life here. And Tezzeret's threatened to ultimate here for about 20, 30 damage. So, yeah. Close game. Oh, right. This isn't the recording from the tournament. Excuse me. All right, so round 2. And I am still, as you can tell, I still have this cough. I have to take a menthol before I do these recordings. So, all right, so I keep a 0-land hand against Keranos, because that seems strong. Fortunately, brainstorm into 1 land and then preordain away cards which are not land. I think I was extremely tired when I played this because right now I should be slamming Dark Confidant with Daze. I don't have any clue why I would not do that. It makes 0 sense. Like, absolutely no sense whatsoever. But given that I didn't do it, let's double down and just not play Dark Confidant ever. What am I doing here? Now, I know at this point, after I was all in, basically on this not playing Dark Confidant plan, that my goal is to daze Keranos. I have to get Keranos to be so expensive that my opponent can't play him. Also, you notice I pushed a Signet to the bottom of my library earlier, which is a bit crazy. Opponent memory lapses his Signet. Well, that's okay. Now I'm hoping, being tapped out here, that he was just going to play a land Keranos. Although I'm happy with him missing a land drop. That's good too. Going to go for Signet again. Hope it sticks. And I don't know what my opponent does in response. Censor. Counters, force spikes it, basically. Okay. I slide a hand. And I get a land drop. So now I've got 4 counter spells up. Well, 3. I can Forbid with my back, I can Force a Will, and I can Daze. So even though it looks like I don't have defenses, or much by the way of defenses, this is still pretty good. Alright, so I just main phase Thirst here. Again, I'm trying to kind of get him to walk into a Daze. nothing good comes of it, so I pass. Opponent plays Chandra, and still has not hit a land drop, but I am going to daze that. And now I top deck land tax, so I do kind of wish that Thirst had been a scroll rack in this game. So I go ahead and get Dark Confidant down. My opponent takes it. I'm not willing to fight over it when I'm holding Palace Jailer, so I'm going to go ahead and tax up. And Palace Jailer my Confidant, which means that if it dies, it'll just come right back to me. Opponent's still missing a land drop. This is problematic for him, to say the least. Finally, he's able to use Cerebral Vortex to get a land, but I have a Wasteland. So he is back down to 4 lands. We'll get in for a little bit of chip damage and throw down a Talisman. Draw up to 7. 7 cards with a Forbid is where you want to be in Magic. Alright, opponent finally goes for it, and Forbid with buyback. Okay, drawing 2 cards per turn. So I could just play the Forbid game, but there's always a chance that he can make his commander uncounterable, so I need to end the game much more quickly than that. So I go ahead and transmute Muddle and get Winter Orb, and that is a wrap. Opponent scoops it up. Alright, here I've got Coupe de Ville. Kind of reminds me of the bad guy from 100 Dalmatians. Isn't that what her name was? Something similar to that. Anyway. Alright, playing Vile Smasher Crom, so it is the bad guy. And I've got a really nice hand. And my opponent Wastelands early, which I'm actually happy about, having the Azorius Signet in my hand. Although, I mean the Azorius Chancery in my hand, although I certainly would have preferred to have gotten a Talisman out first, because now I'm going to have to discard. But at least my Chancery is relatively safe. I cannot daze here, and my opponent plays Liliana. So I throw away Treachery. It's not good. I can daze now. But I go ahead and fetch an Orb just to make that daze a little more valuable. Alright, I'm going to throw away Ravages. So I've got Orb down. I get 3 mana per turn. It's looking pretty good. I was hoping I would just play land and cast Jailer there, but instead I cast As Foretold. Opponent's blessing up Liliana again. I'm going to go ahead and throw away Daze at this point. I'm not seeing it being super useful. My opponent then kills Winter Orb and makes me discard Palace Jailer with a Kolaghan's Command. So during my upkeep, I tick up As Foretold, Mystical Tutor, and Armageddon. My opponent is now sitting there with a Liliana that is making both of us discard, but I have As Foretold running, and as you can see, it's quite hard for me to keep cards in hand. Now, of course, if I draw a counterspell, that's a different story, but I am now going to cast Breya off As Foretold and pass. My opponent can ultimate, but in response, I'm going to deal 3 to Liliana and finish it off. And at this point, what do you do if you're him? It doesn't matter what pile he sets up. I'm going to take As Foretold, and from there, I'm going to win the game. And my opponent realizes this and just gives up. So he's got, with As Foretold running, and he has no lands whatsoever. I mean, I can play 2 cards per turn if I draw them, and my opponent gets to play none. So at that point, I think the game is pretty reasonably over. Coupe de Ville decides to scoop de Ville there. So here we've got Karn 90, and Karn 90 is playing what? Karn 90 is playing Zurgo Bellstriker, and this is a pretty good hand against Zurgo because it's got lots of fast mana, and the Winter Orb makes this hand real good. Well, not fast mana, but lots of mana. Alright, so we're going to go turn 2 Dark Confidant here, only because I'm hoping to trade with Zurgo or removal spell. I don't really care if the Confidant lives. All right, he sends in the team, so boop. Confidant was effectively a smother. And I can now play Winter Orb. Opponent's totally tapped out and has no board presence whatsoever. I've got a remand up. He has no play for the turn. So I'm just going to chill out. I want to keep City of Traders around a little bit longer, at least. Opponent then goes for a Scab Clan Berserker. That thing is a crazy, scary card. Way OP. Luckily, I'm able to remand it. I will go ahead and play some lands now. And I'm going to Imperial Seal here as well, I believe. Yeah. So what do you go get? All right, so opponent has a 1-drop. I went and got Mox Diamond. That way I can cast Breya here. I can untap and have at least 2 mana per turn. And that's enough to operate on. But 1's a little bit shy, so... Alright, I'm going to send in the Thopters. I imagine. So... yeah. Thopters. Sorry, can't prevent it from locking up here. I don't know why this is up either. Guess I can close that. Okay, good. Yeah, it's lagging pretty good. Alright, so I get some Thopter damage in. Pass with a counterspell up. I think. Sorry. Again, I'm not sure why it's taken so long to get through this. I don't think we're bugging, though. I mean, this is all what happened. Alright, opponent goes Franca Mishra. I will stoically rebuttal that. And at that point, my opponent gives up. So, very soon, I was potentially going to be able to play Palace Jailer. And if you can stick a Palace Jailer against red, who can't get through to you, then that game is really, probably truly over. So, at this point, though, I do agree with my opponent. I think he was too far behind on the board to come back from. So that was my 4-0 that on the night that I played, and then today I played this one against Miles B and wrapped it up. So this was the 5-0. All right, very good hand, and my opponent is playing Vial Smasher again. Alright, so I lead off this way because this allows me to do the Tithe trick. Alright, holding control, I sacrifice Misty Rainforest, respond to my own Rainforest by using Tithe. Fetching 2 islands and another island, which I then use to Vampiric Tutor, so I can Painful Truths. It's 5 mana for 3 cards, 5 life for 3 cards, but probably worth it. My opponent plays a Mox Diamond and has no land drops, so... Oh, and I drew Dak. Alright, well, I'm going to play Weathered Wayfarer, a fetch land, and a pass. My opponent edicts away the Wayfarer. Since I don't think that it's going to be too useful, I'm just going to let it go. He does find himself a Wasteland, opts not to use it, which makes perfect sense. So I go ahead and just fetch at the end of his turn and draw a command tower. So my thought process here was I'm going to get to 6 mana, cast Dak Faden and Forbid, and then I'm good. Now this is the first game I played today, and I always tend to make mistakes until I get rolling, and this was a huge error here. I forbid with buyback a Hymn to Torok, which leaves me with exactly 2 cards in hand, which means that if he can counterspell, which he did, then I now lose my entire hand. I should have just let that thing go. Or, at the very least, cast Forbid only. Because I had land, Dak Faden, Armageddon. There was a 50-50 chance there, actually better than 50-50 chance that I actually got to keep Dak Faden. But so it goes. So my follow-up play is just Breya land tax. I have no cards in hand. My opponent Pyroblasts Breya and plays Vial Smasher. This is really bad. Like, that mistake was huge and certainly costly. Alright, so luckily I drew Toxic Deluge here, and I'm hoping that his commander comes winging out. So when I draw Expedition Map, I play it thinking he might counter it, but if he doesn't, then it might be a threat for him, like knowing that I can go get a wasteland, he might be tempted to play his commander, his Crom, and he did. I should not have tacked with the other Thopter. I should have double trump blocked here, but I'm down to 14. I'm going to go ahead and get said wasteland. And before I play Talisman Deluge, what I'm going to do is waste, attack, Deluge first, so that I don't trigger his card draw for his other commander, and then play Talisman. Unfortunately, he then finds a Dark Confidant. So my turn, I'm going to go ahead and cast Breya because he's still not using his wasteland, which is interesting, but he's got a Dark Confidant out. Could have stalled me off with this Breya. Anyway, his turn, he brainstorms into Temple of Deceit into Terminate. Okay. At least he can't attack. So during my upkeep, I go ahead and Enlighten Tutor. I thought after screwing up that turn that I end up playing pretty well throughout. Alright, so I tutor for Crucible and wasteland his Temple of Deceit. Keeping him off double blue. Hit him with the Thopter and pass. I'm going to start showing you what he's drawing. So he Lightning Bolts a Thopter so he can get in for 2 damage since I'm at 8. Which is interesting. He's drawn Counterspell that we know of. And on my turn, I Palace Jailer because he doesn't have double blue, and it lands. So now I'm thinking, like, okay, I'm in the driver's seat here. Probably got it. He Control Magic's my flyer, and I'm like, this is strangely painful. So I preordain into a Cryptic, and there it is. There's the answer. So I play Cryptic, and he has Misdirection. Doggone it. Alright, well, I did wasteland one of his lands first, his Darkslick Shores, prior to making any plays, so that'll help a little bit. Because otherwise I wouldn't have Crucible in play, I wouldn't have got to play that wasteland again. So now he's the Monarch, and he gets his Dark Confidant back. On my turn I recast Crucible, having drawn a Spell Snare, and of course I have Deprive and Snare up. I attack, and fortunately he trades Dark Confidant for my 2/2, which prevents me from becoming the Monarch, so I think that was his thinking. Alright, so I go ahead and wasteland his City of Brass, and in response he plays Fact or Fiction, so I say 4 lands or a Thoughtseize. What do you want? He takes 4 lands. And I am going to now wasteland every turn, essentially, while he is going to attack me for 1 every turn, and he's going to hopefully, he's hoping to kill me before I can find a solution to this. Drew another counterspell. That's not a solution. All right, so because I'm trying to get up to, because I want to get up to enough mana to play Breya with a Spell Snare backup, since I know he has counterspell, I actually stopped using Wasteland for a little while, and also because he has no blue sources other than his fetches. But then when I see that when I draw a Swords to Plowshares, I go ahead and waste his red-black land, and then Swords during upkeep, which lands. So now he goes for Liliana, and I'm going to just counterspell Lily, waste another blue source. He is still drawing 2 cards per turn. I'm now going to waste his Steam Vents. So I drew Ravagers of War, but it doesn't make any sense because I'm way ahead on mana, and I'm basically ravaging just his side of the board with Crucible. So killing my own side as well doesn't seem to be a good plan. Alright, so we're going to get Wasteland out again. And he plays Underground, and during combat, I'm going to just waste it immediately. So he gets to draw an extra card. He is running really low on time, but I'm really low on life, so I Brainstorm on main phase. Because if he uses a fetch land to try to interact with that, then I plan to Wasteland whatever land he fetched. Instead, I just play Grim Monolith and pass with a Wasteland out. And on his turn, he goes for Dak, so we're going to attempt to deprive that and waste his Cascade Bluffs. And here I make a bit of an error. I play Wasteland first, and I waste his waste. Go for a Tezzeret, and he Force of Wills it. So I try for Azorius Signet, and it sticks, and I pass. Now, I could lose to Fiery Confluence here, so I'm quite nervous, actually, having made that play. This turn I play Wasteland, and what I'm going to do is, so I pre-play it prior to anything else happening, and I play Ravages. He has the counter spell that we know about, so I go ahead and counter that with snare. And then fortunately, that's all he's got. So I could have had a Wasteland in play right now. But I do get to tax on the other hand, so. And the reason I played it previous to the turn, I think, was I was trying to work around like Flusterstorm and that type of thing. Which, I don't know if it makes any sense. Anyway, his turn, he plays Verdant Catacombs, nothing. Draws a card off the Monarch, and I go ahead and untap Grim. So my turn, I'm going to go ahead and Wasteland his Verdant, only because whatever he fetches with it, I'm going to replay Wasteland and kill. He fetches nothing. So I go for a Merchant Scroll. He remands it back to my hand, so I scroll again. And this time I get Force of Will to go with the Impulse in my hand. Throwing away a land. Alright, so he's pondering, looking for something. And plays Inquisition. Well, I'm not going to Force of Will that, because Force of Will is the card I care about, so I'm just going to let the Impulse go away. Unfortunately, and fortunately, I drew Snapcaster Mage, so I play Breya, and my opponent removes it with oh goodness gracious, Flame Slash or Dismember. But he isn't able to get all the creatures, and this allows me to get the Monarch back. And then on his turn, he goes for Legacy's Allure, plays Snapcaster, Counterspell. And finally, with him at 8 and me at 4, my opponent finally packs it in. Of course, I'm going to waste his Volcanic Island there and replay Wasteland again. And I've got a Counterspell, and I'm hitting for 3 per turn. So yeah, I think it was pretty much over. You see, Skeletal Scrying did nothing for me this game. If it had been Liliana right here, I would have been quite happy to have put that into play and started using it. So it's one of the situations where scrying is not as good. And too many of those come up, and that's why I made that switch. So let's run through the second set of 5 games. So the first one was, I'm going to skip this one against, so that was Miles B. And then I'm going to skip this one where I lose with that version of the deck that had Skeletal Scrying and stuff. I win one, I make changes. Alright, no, I lose with it, I make changes, I win one, I lose again. I just dropped from those and I said, forget this. Start a new one, fix the deck, so I did. Start a new one, and here's a clean set against Dirty Duck going first. Well, we'll see. Other than Thirst for Knowledge being Scroll Rack in this particular playthrough, everything else is as is. And I'll bring up the deck list a second time at the end. So I've got an amazing hand, and my opponent's playing Oloro. So this hand is savage, and I drew a Fellware Stone, which makes it so much better. So I get to go first turn Grim off of City, Fellware Stone, Mox Opal, as foretold, pass. Opponent does have Ancient Tomb, and he Demonic Tutors. Alright, as foretold ticks up, and I draw Dark Confidant. So now I get to cast Dark Confidant, Imperial Seal, Crucible of Worlds, pass. Opponent Brainstorms, plays a land. Or no, he plays a land. I drew Brainstorm off of Dark Confidant, so I Brainstorm. With As Foretold, attack, cast Tezzeret, untap some mana sources, and pass, getting City of Traders right back out of the graveyard with the Crucible. Opponent Anguished Unmakings and exiles my As Foretold, which makes a ton of sense. So I go ahead and ponder on my turn, finding basically nothing, and turning it into a Cryptic Command at random. Tezzeret for 1. Activate Expedition Map, which I fetched to go with this here Crucible. I'll go ahead and kill City of Traders one more time, and play Wasteland and take out his Command Tower, which cuts off both blue and black mana at this time. So I cannot Cryptic here safely. My opponent's kind of running out of steam. He gets a Pithing Needle, though, naming Tezzeret, or Pithing Needle, I should say. Pithing Needle. Naming Tezzeret. I go ahead and smack him with Dark Confidant and play Breya. And just ignore the fact that Tezzeret doesn't work. He dismembers Breya. My turn. I attack with Confidant 2 flyers. Replaying Wasteland, of course. Cast Dak Faden, plus up, and boom, Council's Judgment. Council's Judgment takes out Pithing Needle, and that is a wrap. At this point, I get to activate Tezzeret again. My opponent gives up. Because next turn, I'm going to attack for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 points of damage. So probably a good time to give up. All right. So that was Dirty Duck. And that was honestly just a dirty draw. So, very simple game. But it's nice to see some of the different tech that's been, the adjustments that have been made for the deck coming into play here. And here's one where Liliana plays a huge role, if I recall correctly. So playing against Thalia, going second, I would never in a million years keep this hand, but going first, I can probably preordain into something. I do. Tuck two non-lands and find a land, thankfully. He gets first turn Mother of Roots. So with my land, I end up fetching Scrub and casting Talisman so that I have double black, double blue, red, and white. All right, so on my turn, so he plays Thalia. I don't get a land, so I Imperial Seal and pass. All right, so he hits me with Thalia, misses a land drop. All right, I got Dimir Aqueduct. So my turn, I Merchant Scroll, finding myself Force of Will, which I cannot cast until Thalia is gone. And I use a Dimir Aqueduct to play a pickup. And my opponent paths Thalia, his own Thalia, which is, he wanted land really bad. So now he plays Precinct Captain. And now I can play Dak Faden because he also played Tarksteel Citadel. I have no idea why that's in his mono white deck, but it is now working for me. And then he doesn't tap it in response. So I got the feeling my opponent's maybe a bit new or something. So I play Toxic Deluge off of the mana he just allowed me to have. He goes for Knight of the White Orchid, and because he's hurting on mana, I actually Force of Will that. He activates his mana land and kills Dak. During my upkeep, I Enlighten Tutor. For Winter Orb, play Liliana and take a Brave the Elements out of his hand. He untaps and says nothing. My turn, I draw a Wasteland and take a Fiend Hunter out of his hand. Next turn, I drew a land, and I take yet another card out of his hand at no cost to me whatsoever, Recruiter of the Guard. And I go ahead and fetch a Plateau in order that I may cast Breya, who comes down, and at this point, opponent has had enough. He gives up, and we move on to the next game. But Liliana was such a backbreaker here. 3 cards right there. She's threatening to go ultimate. She can kill the next 3 creatures he plays. That's pretty brutal. So I liked it there. All right. So from Motorhead, I end up playing this individual here, Gemini. I think. Or were we already on Gemini? No, we were not. All right, Gemini playing Narset. Leads off with a Chrome Mox, imprinting a Time Walk, basically, and then casts Ponder. Imprints a Temporal Mastery, and ponders into a Rugged Prairie. So I see a weakness in mana base over there. Alright. So on my turn, I go ahead and play first turn land tax. Moxop will go. When it plays Is It Signet, no land, so I play a pickup land, go. Is he going to let me tax? He plays Coalition Relic, charge, and a land. Alright, I can tax. So the land he played was Hall of the Bandit Lord, which means if he can play his commander, it's going to attack immediately. That's scary. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some lands. Cast Dak Faden and steal his Coalition Relic. And with that, my opponent has no play and scoops. Quick, efficient, brutal victory. And we move to someone who I believe I have had videos against before in this channel. Puppy Puncher. Puppy Puncher. Reminds me of that horrible character from Scooby-Doo. Scrappy. Of course, he used to say Puppy Power, but anyway. Alright, so I'm playing against Leovold, and I'm going first, which helps make this hand keepable. My opponent leads off with the Serum Visions, and I've got turn 2 Deprive up if I need it. I'm going to go ahead and fetch immediately. Only because I don't want to walk into a Stifle, and If he has Wasteland, I've got tons of cards over here. He goes for him to Torok, and I just let it happen. I lose a land in Tezzeret, but I kept Deprive and Armageddon. I felt like my hand was so strong, and I had so many good cards that it was worth just letting the Armageddon, the Hymn to Torok happen. And my deck rewards me with a top deck Crucible. So, on the next turn, my opponent plays Leovold, and I'm able to get rid of it using Liliana. He then plays True Name Nemesis, and this is a very sad turn for my opponent. I plus up Liliana, I think about playing Breya here and decide I'm going to play Armageddon, Land from Graveyard, Floating Ancestral, pass, and then I F6 on my opponent's turn, and for some crazy reason, I don't know what he did, but he fast forwards through his attack step. He plays the land and doesn't attack Liliana, and that is game over. On my turn, I can just play Underground Sea, -2 Liliana, defeat the True Name Nemesis with it, and that's it. The game's over, right? And my opponent, realizing how badly he screwed up, he gives up. I feel bad for him here. And the reason, by the way, Armageddon was that my opponent had discarded Life from the Loam to Liliana, so I needed to get him below where he could outpace Liliana using Life from the Loam. But yeah, right here, that was a sad error on my opponent's part. But unfortunately, it is a tournament, and I have no ability to undo his mistake. I'm certainly not going to not activate Liliana at that point, and frankly, my opponent gave up before I even could have. So I've got first turn City of Traders, Talisman, Imperial Seal. My opponent forces the Talisman because I played City of Traders, which was the correct play and really hurt me. But I top deck a Winter Orb. So I go Winter Orb and fetch land into Imperial Seal. For a land tax, because I need to rebuild my hand. And I think this is probably the best way to do it. Alright, so I go ahead and play a tax. It sticks. My opponent either misses a land drop or does not play one intentionally to work around tax. I play Wasteland to see which it is. And my opponent ponders. He's, of course, playing Vile Smasher Crom. I'll go ahead and minimize that. Ponders into a land. So it's hard to say with the ponder masking what he may or may not have had. So I go ahead and Vampiric Tutor at the end of the turn. And since I don't know, I go deep into the tank on thought on this and finally decide I'm going to get Is It Boiler Works. And I pick up a land and pass, I believe. No, my opponent actually uses a Scalding Tarn, so I wasteland his Watered Grave. Because I feel like he was missing mana and I wanted to find out if that was right. So I go ahead and play a land. I think maybe the Ponder might have been what found him the land. But he gets a Vampiric, and I mess up here really bad. I should have Factor Fictioned as soon as he tapped that land. I did not. And now, my opponent has 2 mana, and he gets to Mana Leak this, and then play the card that I was certain he went and got, which was Wasteland. Big mistake on my part. So he has managed to rebalance the game. However, I still have tax out, threatening him. Alright, so I drew Spell Pierce, or Snare, that's a very nice card to have. My opponent's at 7 cards. I'm under no pressure to play. He goes for Demonic Tutor, so I'm going to snare that because I don't want him to go get Dimer Aqueducts. I go ahead and play Polluted Delta here, but only because I drew a land and I could play my commander next turn, and I want to have that option. I leave Delta in play, however, because I may decide to sack it and go get Triple Island, for example. Alright, opponent plays Preordain. I draw a Signet, and I'm going to try it to see if I can pinch his mana, and he actually lets it through. That's a very big improve. And on his turn goes for a Chandra, Torch of Defiance, plussing it up, revealing Cryptic Command, and dealing 2 to me. Alright, so I do get to land tax, but there's a Chandra out there defiantly waving a torch at me, so I must deal with that. So we're going to start by getting our lands. I've got a Chrome Mox and Ravages of War and 4 lands in hand. I draw Night's Whisper, which may get imprinted under the Mox, but I'm not really quite ready to make that call yet. So I go ahead and just cast Breya. Alright, so my opponent pluses up Chandra, which is odd, but he does it for mana, and then plays Snapcaster and Snapcaster on Demonic Tutor, and he DTs. So to me, this means that he's planning on sweeping the board next turn using Chandra's mana producing ability. So on my turn, I play Chrome Mox for no imprint, sack the Signet and the Mox to kill his Snapcaster, and attack and defeat his Chandra. So this way, yeah. Alright, so then I also play a Weathered Wayfarer on my turn. So on the next turn, I use Weathered Wayfarer to go get Ancient Tomb, play Ancient Tomb, and pass. I could guess Grim here, but I'm expecting him to sweep the board because that's what I read that he got, and I want Ancient Tomb out. Well, actually, he got, I'm going to pause this here, this is important. He actually got, he didn't get what I thought he got, which was Toxic Deluge. He got Fiery Confluence. So when he played the modes for Fiery Confluence, he chose to deal 2 damage, or destroy target artifact, Winter Orb, Breya, and then to do 1 damage to each creature, which would kill both of my flyers and my Weathered Wayfarer. However, because it's a card with 2 targets, and then 1 secondary effect that happens as part of the resolution, I sacrificed the Winter Orb and Breya to gain 5 life. And the card now has no targets. And a card with no targets that previously had them is countered by game state rules. And because it's countered, the secondary splash damage of 1 to each creature doesn't happen. And so he actually did not get to kill my 3/1/1s as a result. So it was a very important turn right there. Because, of course, as you know, I'm holding Ravages. And I get to untap all of my land first. So I'm going to go ahead and draw off Night's Whisper, Ravages. I thought about using Weather Wayfarer first, but it felt too greedy and I did not want to get dazed. And then I play a land and cast Grim Monolith and pass. Alright, so next turn I go ahead and just pick up land and attack. So that I can now cast, and oh, my opponent did float an Ancestral at some point. As did I believe. No, he did. He floated an Ancestral. Alright, so my turn, I play Dak Faden. It sticks. And I use Weathered Wayfarer. I don't think I use Weathered Wayfarer yet. I actually play Dak Faden, Sword of Feast and Famine. And I plus up and throw away some lands. Alright, so now on my turn, I'm going to equip Sword onto the Thopter, play a pickup land, Dak Faden away the lands that don't tap for 2 mana at least. Attack with both creatures, untap 4 mana. Post combat, I'm going to cast a Izzet Signet, push some mana into it, cast Demonic Tutor and Lightning Bolt his commander. On his turn, he Dreadbores and kills my Weathered Wayfarer, but that's, far too little, far too late. And on my turn, I, of course, move these. Well, at this point, you can see, as you can see, the game's over. He's down to 2 cards in hand. He's got the sword he's dealing with. I've got multiple mana sources per turn. But what I drew and played was Cavern of Souls, or I think I had it in my hand. So I played Cavern of Souls. I'm going to cast Breya here uncounterably, then attack with my team, make him discard, untap all of my lands, which I know I'll now have Breya out, and then activate Breya and deal 3 to my opponent. And with the handwriting on the wall, seeing the Cavern of Souls and me starting to tap up for Breya level mana, my opponent goes ahead and just scoops it up. And that was a clean sweep to make a 5-0 for the second time today, which was really nice, as I'm trying to build up enough tickets so that I can afford 2 more Wastelands. It's very painful and I regret the one that I sold. So anyway, this is the deck list as it is now. Certainly if you want to play around with card slots, I think Scroll Rack is a flexible slot, but I do like having it in here. So anyway, hope you enjoyed watching. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. That is all I've got.